Welcome back to Prestige Access. My name is Zack, and today we're going to have on my friend Chris Nowinski, Harvard graduate, WWE superstar, and he currently is the founder and CEO of Concussion Legacy Foundation, where he's spreading awareness and education around concussions and CTE. We have a great conversation. He's a great friend of mine. We have a lot of fun, and we talk some pro wrestling. Of course, we talk a little bit about how we got inducted into the business through Rikishi's stink face. We have some fun talking about that. Harvard graduate, he gets to share a little bit or a lot of his knowledge. And we talk about some more serious stuff related to concussions, CTE, and the current state and climate of professional sports surrounding that. So tune in. Hope you love it. Looking forward to sharing it with you. All right, guys. Thanks for joining us today. Chris, my man, how are you? It's great to have you today. As someone who's known you as a friend for a while and your work for quite some time, I think this is going to be an episode that people really enjoy, learn a lot, take a lot from, whether you're an athlete or not. It's going to be super informational. So I'm glad to have you. Thanks for joining us today.
No, thanks for having me, Zach. Appreciate it, buddy.
So let's get a little bit of background on you as an athlete, a performer, and then what you're doing now. I mean, you started Harvard graduate, smart man, spent some time in the WWE. It's our commonality. We are pro wrestlers at heart always. But that is what inevitably led you to your position now, being a founder, CEO of Concussion Legacy Foundation. So if you could kind of just take us through that journey just for a few minutes, that'd be great.
Yeah. The fast version is lucky. Grew up outside Chicago. Got recruited to play some football at Harvard. Had a great time. Didn't know what I wanted to do with life. Got bored at a consulting job. Loved watching wrestling and decided I'm going to take a stab at it because it looked like everyone was having so much fun, which they are. And so was got on Tough Enough, which was wild on MTV, and then did it's over a year on Monday Night Raw until I got kicked in the head too much. Wrestling is hard.
It is hard.
It is hard. You got to do it right. And so a few accidents, and suddenly I had a 15-year headache and post-concussion syndrome. And in trying to research how to get better, I realized that I hadn't been told the truth about how bad concussions are. We hadn't been told about this thing called CTE. And I started going down that road going, God, I think a lot of people are dying from this and we should change it. And so luckily, what's exciting looking back 20 years later is that we have completely changed the culture on concussions. The problem with CT is it's a lot bigger than we thought. And so now I'm dedicating my life to ending it. And it's a lot of work.
It is. And Chris, I mean, you were coming up in the early 2000s in pro wrestling, in the WWE, and that was a time not just in wrestling, but in the world in general. We didn't really speak or hear much or even know much about head injuries, head trauma. Was there a time when you were wrestling, was it a specific moment was it one shot, one injury that you said, all right, now I'm done? Or was it just a combination of, hey, I'm thinking something might be wrong here?
No, it was a very slow death. It was, I got what I now know were a few concussions that I blew off while I was wrestling, certainly some while in football. The one that I realized was a problem was June 2003, just a house show, kick to the chin, where I forgot what we were doing out there. I had this massive headache. And for the first time, like that happened a lot. It just didn't go away. And the problem was that I didn't realize that mattered. I remember I was almost going to confess, like something's really wrong with me. And then I walked into the medical room and saw what people were dealing with real injuries. And I was like, I can't tell them my head hurts. So I just continued to wrestle on and off for 5 weeks and basically like just did so much additional damage to an already injured brain that's why it didn't go away, because I didn't know any better. I thought you were supposed to be tough and wrestle through it. And if you can, I didn't want people to think I was soft or lose my spot, or to have the other guy I was supposed to wrestle that night not be able to work. And so a lot of bad, well-intentioned thoughts that sort of led to my demise.
Of course. And in our business, That is the mindset, especially back then. It was, hey, if I don't work, one, I don't get paid, and like my spot's gone when I do come back. It's like that's it for me. So
Yeah.
not even just to mention, like you might go into the trainer's room and see somebody with a broken whatever, and like he's hurt. I'm okay. I can suck it up
Yeah.
and go wrestle. Or
It
that's
was
the
the
mind,
fused necks who got me. It was like, if they're wrestling with a fused neck, like,
right?
I feel like I have the flu, like big deal.
Right.
Right.
But inevitably, and now we know 20 years later, and we're going to continue to learn, head injuries are just as, if not more serious.
Yeah. Basically head and neck are sort of in the same ballpark. Like they can both end your life and ruin your quality of life forever if you do it wrong.
Exactly. So September being Concussion Awareness Month, wanted to have you on just to shed some light on everything we're discussing here, because as athletes, Chris, it often we're surrounded with professionals and a medical team and people who are there to help us. But it's not just athletes that suffer head injuries and head trauma and get concussions. It's everyday working people sometimes that have accidents. How can we get them to, one, know that there's a concussion or a head trauma or an issue, and shed some awareness and education on them to go get the proper help and understand what it's like to, one, have a head injury, and two, treat it.
So one of the more interesting things about this, I realized very early on that the best way to change the culture on this was to do it through sports and entertainment.
Mhm.
So it's one thing to try to mandate medical education in schools and other places, but the other place that this is always happening is like NFL broadcasts, right? So like every week someone's getting pulled out for a concussion.
Mhm.
Every other game someone's diagnosed with a concussion, and it was this great teaching lab. And so what was interesting is 20 years ago you weren't allowed to really talk about it. So they
Mhm.
wouldn't use the words, they wouldn't acknowledge it, they would just cut to commercial. And then when it started becoming a thing, because starting with the print media, then we started also training broadcasters about sort of their responsibility to acknowledge it. Like say the word, people, their kids watching, this is going to be the number one place they learn what a concussion looks like, that it's serious, that they need to come out of the game. But that was also our way to reach everybody else too, right? Because a huge chunk of the population is watching sports, and especially the NFL. So if we could change that conversation, and then what was fascinating to watch that is that now you see concussions as storylines in like every drama show there is, right? It's so amusing to me. Like they dig into it. They have CT episodes on Law and
Right.
Order and stuff, and it's like it's been a very cool way to make it interesting to learn about this stuff. So it's been that culture change really is best exemplified by all the great entertainment and sports changes.
Right. And anytime you're trying to spread awareness about anything, changing the culture and the terminology around the words that are used is the biggest piece. Because, like you just said, for the longest time, it was taboo to even discuss it, um, especially in the NFL, in pro wrestling, in professional sports, because, first of all, that takes the player out. Oh, their head hurts. Boo hoo. Well, I mean, that could be a very, very serious issue. Just because they don't have a broken neck, like we said, it's just as serious, if not more. And it's almost like people did not want to discuss it because they always knew that the problem existed. They just didn't want to pay attention to it.
Yeah, there's sort of two sides to it. Like on the one side, like when I wrote a book 20 years ago called Head Games Football's Concussion Crisis, a lot of it was about how the NFL at that time, I think, was actively covering it up. They were publishing research saying concussions weren't so bad for you. On the pro wrestling side, though, having known these people very well, I think people just didn't know, right? Because pro wrestling sort of followed its lead from sports in terms of medical care.
Right.
And so they had sports medicine docs like at the arenas, but that wasn't on their radar. So it wasn't on WWE's radar. So I think back to, there was a book that came out while I was there called Unscripted that was really interesting. And in it, like they wrote a profile of, I think this is all accurate. It could be my bad memory, but when there's a triple threat match with Kurt Angle and The Rock, and I'm blanking on who else, but and Kurt Angle was knocked unconscious, and they had to put him, wheel him backstage like on a stretcher, and then he woke up backstage. You're like, oh, you're awake? Get back out there! And he
I heard
came
that.
running
Yeah.
out. And completely blacked out, and they had to like make up the rest of the match, and that not only were they proud of it, they sort of openly talked about it, like it was so cool. And back then that was what I thought too, because that's what I knew. And now they're back, like there's no way that Triple H would ever let something like that happen again, because he's bought into he understands the stuff now, and the culture there is just so different and so protective of the athletes. So that's sort of probably the decent example of what it was like, and it would happen all the time. Guys were knocked out. As long as they woke up, you could keep going.
For sure. And again, that was the mindset that we had. And, unfortunately we just didn't know. We just didn't know at the time. Right.
Yeah.
And a lot of people still don't. And that's the purpose of you now leading the Concussion Legacy Foundation, to spread this awareness, spread this education and knowledge. So you do seminars for professional sports leagues. You go around and you do just that. I've had a few seminars with you, AEW. I know you go to WWE, TNA. Can we talk a little bit about that and just what that journey and experience is like for you to be able to share that knowledge with professionals and athletes who need to hear it?
Yeah, although I'll push back on the question, because it isn't sports leagues. The sports leagues won't invite me in. A lot of the sports leagues, I still don't think they're worried about their athletes getting scared, but I really think like some people recognize down deep, like, all right, if we tell them everything's going on, we can't convince them to go out there when we need them, or to hide their concussion in the big game. Like,
well, I didn't know that. I thought you were working with the leagues too. Wow.
No. No, I have not been invited in front of active pro athletes. I don't know if ever. Even though I advise, different groups, like they don't let me have an open mic.
Who organizes it when you come to wrestling?
Oh, but wrestling, I see wrestling a different world.
Okay.
So wrestling is the one place that does let me in. It started with WWE a little while back, and then it was about like 2013, I think, or so, that they started having me come in for annual trainings, and that's been wonderful. And I just did my most recent one yesterday. So they invited me up to Orlando, and I trained all the NXT young folks, who a lot of them were hearing it for the first time, and I couldn't believe how many people they have there now. And it's amazing. Like they have a huge medical staff there. Like it's all a very different world than sort of what we came up in. So so WWE, it's AEW. I'm doing my AEW ones in a couple weeks. TNA recently had me in, which was great. I've done NWA as well for Billy Corgan, who's really bought into the stuff. Is on a national advisory board. So like for me, it's like, I left the wrestling world in a very weird place. If you remember back to that time, like a good chunk of the locker room was, thought I was stealing checks when I had post-concussion syndrome. Like I'd be accused of that in front of other people, like in public.
Wow. I didn't know that.
And because they were trying to defend the business, like, I remember who they were, and some of them have been apologized, and they've all been very nice about it. But, they thought, because they couldn't see anything, that I was faking it because I was a weird Harvard guy, like, trying to trick people or something, which is fine, because I get where they were coming from. They didn't have the knowledge. And then it was, there was some times where I was not welcome there. But then now that I'm invited back in, and everyone is buying in, and everyone's so kind to me when I come and say, thanks, for helping us make this safer. Because, it sucks to have your career taken away out of your own ignorance, like, right, when you're on your way up. And that's how I started the talk yesterday. I said, look, I want you guys to succeed. I want you to go to the top, and I want you to be there for 50 years, because this is a business you could do that if you protect yourself. And so it's very cool that they listen, they take it in, and that we don't have some of these accidents and injuries we used to have before, because top to bottom, the culture's changed. It's different. And, and it is like, for me, being an outsider, it's like watching, like Paul Levesque sat on our board for 6 years and would come to all the meetings, come to all the events, and he just really dug in on this. And I've watched him sort of carry that flag. And now seeing that he's in charge, of everything, just knowing that how much he understands this and cares about it, and sees it not only from the human side, but the business side of, you never want to lose a great talent to too many concussions or mistreated concussions. Like it's very rewarding to know that it's different.
Yeah. Paul Levesque, Triple H, for those who don't know, he's a guy that truly, like you just said, does care talent first, because he was on the other side of that. So it is great to see a leader step up in that capacity and put people first that are the real moneymakers for the company. I mean, if you don't have your stars, your talent, you don't have a company. And so if they're not safe, if they're not protected, if they're not educated on, just because you can see an injury like you brought up, doesn't mean that it's not there. And by the way, here are the proper steps to take so you don't come back too early and get re-injured, which is another huge issue.
Yeah.
Could we talk a little bit about post-concussion syndrome and how to identify it? What is the proper time length we should be waiting? I know that varies, but can we talk a little bit about
Yeah,
that?
no, and it's important to talk about because it keeps changing, right? So when we started doing this 20 years ago, the response was immediately, well, if playing through your concussions is bad, why don't we have you completely rest? And so sometimes we're telling people to go sit in a dark room for like a week or two. And what we've learned about that is that like isolation is punishment in prisons because it causes anxiety, it causes mental health issues. Like you don't actually want to be alone in a dark room. It's not good for your brain. You need stimulation, you need interaction. And so now the advice is basically like, take it easy for a day or two. Like, don't put yourself at risk, stay home, get sleep, get nutrition, let yourself recover, but then start to integrate back into life after a day or two. Get to a doctor right away so they can help you and advise you along this path. But you may be okay to go back to work a bit, depending on what kind of symptoms you have. You may be okay to start going back to school earlier than you used to. Just don't put yourself at risk to get hit in the head again, right? And you sort of ease into the sport. So it starts with just walking, and then you start to get your heart rate up. Your heart is a great thing that can let you know if you're not recovered, because we don't have any tests to tell you when you're safe to do anything. There's no biomarker, no blood test, no scan. So sometimes they just have you start exercising. And if your body responds well to exercise, it means your brain's in a good place. If you start feeling nauseous and sick, which a lot of us do for a while, that means your brain's not probably ready. And then if your symptoms, most people are going to feel fine after 2 weeks. But if you don't, at some point you might start rehabbing. So basically, if you're not doing well, it's not necessarily because your brain is still damaged, but something's off. It could be your vestibular system, your balance, your visual issues that are causing headaches. You could have whiplash in your neck that's causing pain. And you could have issues with your sleep that's causing you to wake up feeling terrible and foggy. So basically the advice is go to a comprehensive concussion clinic that's near you. And if you can't find one, go to our helpline at the Concussion Legacy Foundation. We'll connect you. And they'll figure out what your lingering issues are and then how to best attack those. And so luckily it's not the old days. It was like, once you got post-concussion syndrome, you got it until it's gone. Now I've watched a lot of great athletes rehab their way back to sports after months or a year or two. And it's not that we're worried about them having long-term brain damage. It's something just went off and it was able to be rehabbed.
I do have to say personally, super scary stuff. I've had concussions before, and there was one that I remember that kind of just lingered. It didn't really go away. And I gave it, the standard 10 to 14 days of, take it easy. But I remember, like, because we're athletes again, and I hate going back to that, but that's the mindset. It's like, well, I'm going to give it a little bit today in the gym, probably more than I should. I'm just going to test it, see what happens. And when you're going through that, fresh off a concussion, very quickly if you're pushing it too hard, because your body's going to tell you. And when you brought up balance, I remember I was laying down for a dumbbell chest press, and my music was cranked and everything. I sat up and I was super lightheaded, like I just got kicked in the mouth or something. I was just like, whoa. And I dropped the weights and I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to go home because I don't feel right. But doing that, a lot of people don't know that can set you backwards. And now you got to repeat the whole process again. It's the headaches. It's this waking up during the middle of the night. Those are all signs that you should probably rest some more because you're not ready. And could we talk a little bit about some science? I'm cool with going into it a little bit. Why after post-concussion syndrome, when there's an issue, we can fall backwards. Let's explain that. And that could be even more detrimental than the original concussion.
There's actually no great studies on the physiology of why that is. And it's in part because the cause of your symptoms could be so many things that we can't measure them. So I don't know, like, so for what you were going through, you basically had a bunch of injured neurons. You had mitochondria that couldn't function normally because you had calcium channel issues. And so when your body needed the energy to do that exercise or whatever it was, your brain couldn't produce it. Your body couldn't produce it.
Right.
And then that's why it's telling you to sort of shut down. And that's just sort of a narrative based on some small understanding of science from mouse models. Like, we don't really know.
Sure.
But essentially you're when you are in, you sort of think about it like a hamstring, like you tear your hamstring, it's starting to heal. But if you go out and sprint again, it might more easy to go back to the beginning of that recovery. Right. So maybe that's probably the best analogy for what might be happening in your brain. But there's so much happening in your brain, and there's so much more we're learning all the time. Like, we had a publication in Nature last week where we identified like multiple new types of brain damage that are happening even in the advance of CTE in new places. And so it's like your brain is so complex that it helps me appreciate why we probably shouldn't be letting it hit in the head too much.
For sure, man.
Hey, Chris, Mike, producer of the pod. I just had a few questions. Like, number one, as a dad, my daughter's heavily into sports, doing a ton of stuff. My nephews are playing football. Are there any signs that a parent should look at when their kid gets banged around in this sport? I know there's been a lot of advancements in the sport. You see the new NFL players coming up with those foam helmets on and extra protection during practice and stuff. But is there anything a parent should be looking at when?
So yeah, the advice for parents is, we need to up our game on prevention. So, the best thing you can do is not have them in the first place. And so we're actually like heavily pushing sports to reform how they play. So for example, like when we started this battle, you could head a ball anytime in soccer, and coaches could have punting practices, and now we know like there's no heading till 11 is a rule. And there's education on severe restrictions on how you start heading with young people, because we do know it not only causes concussions, but it increases the risk of CTE. Football is one place that sort of mostly ignored that advice of like reducing contact. Like it's sort of league by league, and it's not enforced. So you want to be a voice to you want to be monitoring what's going on and be a voice to the coaches of, you are aware of this and that they better not be exposing your kids to unnecessary head impacts, doing dangerous drills. I posted on my TikTok today at Christopher Nowinski and on Instagram, a video of a youth football coach throwing giant bags, like the tackling dummies, at kids to teach them how to hit and still run, but he's pegging them in the head with bags that are as big as they are. And it's just like, how, like, this is so stupid. So you don't want that happening. And then when it comes to concussions, like, your kid best, right? It's important to appreciate that most concussion symptoms are not immediate. So we always think about the NFL TV concussion. If they got hit and they stood up and they fell over, or they held their head crying, or they're unconscious, and like, those are the easy ones to spot. But the hard ones to spot are the ones where they take a big hit and they pop up and they go, I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine. But then slowly they start to feel different. And now they're going to feel pressure of, well, I can't come out now because everyone thought I'm fine, and the hit was 20 minutes ago. No one saw me. And they may not say anything. And it's your job to be that detective of, hey, you were acting a little funny. How do you feel? Give them that chance to self-report. Or they may not report till they get home that night. That's when that headache comes on, or they can't sleep, or they feel nauseous. So you have to realize that it can be 48 hours before symptoms come on. And to realize that if they took a hit, or they were in a contact event or sporting event that you weren't there, it could be related. A lot of times we want to shrug it off as they get headaches sometimes. They didn't get any sleep last night, or whatever it is, but it could be concussion. And it's just important. Hopefully you have an athletic trainer to talk to, or you call your doctor and say, this is what I know, and help them decide. Sometimes it isn't, but if it is, you do want to know, and you do want to keep them out of harm's way.
So I didn't go to Harvard, but outside looking in with the whole CTE thing, like, I feel as though some of these leagues, the NFL specifically, like, either has started to normalize it. So have you had any frustrations of feeling like we're kind of going backwards a little bit? Because I can't help but notice it. Maybe it's technology, maybe it's the right doctors being there, but a lot of these hits that, I think a Tua holding his fingers like this in front of him, and the next thing you know, he's back in the game. I thought for sure he'd never play again. Like, is it a little bit of both where we're normalizing it, sadly, again, or is it the tech?
No, it's not the tech. And in fact, there was a publication out this summer from the NFL showing that the Guardian caps didn't actually make a difference in reducing concussions. It was more style of play being changed and opportunities, but there hasn't been a lot of attention drawn to that. But so no, it's definitely not the tech. For Tua, like the issue was 4 days before the time where his fingers went like this, he should have been held out. Because he got hit and they claimed it was a back injury, even though it was very obvious it was a concussion. And he did the head shake, which inspired me to write a paper on the head shake because I didn't realize it wasn't on anyone's list. Now it is, but it had never been given a name and it had never been studied. And it is predictive of concussion. So, so that Tua was sort of like the last big miss, I think. There might have been one since, but they don't miss very much anymore. At least they go to the blue tent. They might be letting more people back onto the field than they should, but that's because that's what the players want too. Because if it is a very minor one, they often want to play through so they don't lose their position. And that's in theory a bit of informed consent, but it's hazy. And then so the concussion spotting is better and the concussion care is better. Like there's no question about that. It's been a long way to get here. But then the question is returning. I think that's part of the change of the understanding of it is that CTE is really the big enemy. For concussions, as long as you recover on all our neurological tests and you feel fine, no one's going to shut you down. No one's going to preemptively shut you down anymore. We used to do it a little bit. I think there's some athletes who might have said, maybe I shouldn't have quit. I could have been better after a year or two. But now it's like Tua did get a ton of time off after the last one, right? Like they finally figured it out. And I think that sort of spotlighted it for everybody. So concussions are not the reason to retire unless you're still symptomatic and a doctor tells you. But the issue is Tua going back. He's at very high risk for CTE, like they all are. And it's important that they know that because it's not just them who carry the burden. It will be their families. Like I spent a lot of my time with counseling widows and wives and children dealing with out of control dads who have this sudden onset of crazy behaviors in their 50s, 60s, 70s. And it's almost always, we find CT and we think those things are related.
Chris, we have just a few minutes to touch on the difference between concussions and CTE for those who don't know, because there is a lot of brain study. There are several phases. Could we just talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So concussion is an acute injury that you will recover from with the right care. And it's when you get hit in the head and you feel something. CTE is a degenerative brain disease that is caused by repetitive hits to the head, whether they cause symptoms or not. We now know that you have 100 billion neurons, trillions of connections in your brain. Those hard hits that you think you're fine, you're not fine from. And if you get too many of them, that one of them can spark these lesions that turn into degeneration, like a crack in the windshield that keeps spreading for the rest of your life. And so it starts as these small, tiny lesions, and usually in the frontal lobes, because that's where your brain is most vulnerable when it rapidly moves. And then about 12, 15 years between the 4 stages, you're advancing in most cases. Some people are genetically protected and don't seem to advance very far, but others, you can get to a dementia case as early as your 50s and 60s, where you've lost so much brain tissue that you can no longer take care of yourself independently. So it's a bad disease. It's been a little bit hidden in the world as misdiagnosed Alzheimer's, we've been learning, because at the end it looks the same. You're just in a nursing home, you don't recognize people. But on the way there's a lot of behavioral components we're realizing, because it's just a very unique type of brain damage that's a little bit different for everybody because of where it starts in your frontal lobe and what in your brain, what that part of your brain is responsible for.
I found that those who really start to learn about this, it's a shock to them that you can recover, but you don't heal. The brain does not, it's not like muscle. It doesn't heal itself. So those neurons that are damaged forever. Is that safe to say?
Yeah. There's much less neurogenesis than Instagram will let you believe.
Right.
And your recovery is rewiring around it, new connections between the existing neurons. But eventually that will fade if you are losing neurons too fast, like with a disease like CT.
Which is super scary stuff. And I really encourage everyone to check out what Chris is doing with the Concussion Legacy Foundation to educate around head injuries, CTE, concussions, especially if you're an athlete. Even if you're a parent who has kids that are athletes, to Mike's point, it is super important to save the longevity of not just our lives, but the sports that we love. Because again, without the athletes and their safety, we don't have these sports. We don't have this entertainment. And unfortunately, you could be very, very hurt and die from these injuries. Chris, thank you. Can we talk where just to find you online? And if anyone needs help related to concussions, where can they go?
Sure. The help thing is the most important. If you are worried about concussions or CT, concussionfoundation.org/helpline or clfhelpline.org. Just you can find us. I'm on socials, Christopher Nowinski on most, at Chris Nowinski 1 on X, and always trying to educate through that. And then, thank you for always being a part of Concussion Awareness Month with us, trying to spread the word, let people know the helpline is out there. Let us raise money to help keep it free to everybody who comes. So I look forward to have this interview on your page, and appreciate you sharing the good word with your huge audience.
Absolutely, man. That's why we're here. We want to make this education accessible to everybody. So thank you for coming on, spreading that knowledge. Mike, do you have anything for Chris?
Yeah. So one last thing. Have a little bit of fun right now. WWE, like obviously you were a pro wrestler. Like how cool was that? Your first time going into the ring, hearing your music, and then do you have a bucket list match that you had, one that you look back and you're so proud of, and maybe like late night you turn on and you're like, yeah.
No, that has never happened. I do. I mean, I had so few matches I can almost remember and be fond of all of them. Maybe I'd go back and watch. Me and Tommy Dreamer once had a hardcore match in the LA Staples Center, in like an office. He put me through the ceiling and put him through a wall, and doing that. I want to go back and watch that one because that one was a lot of fun. So I would do that. And then the idea, it was a good memory yesterday of just the idea of walking into that ring, for the first time. You're making me flash back to my first tryout match, my first dark match that they had me do, right before they hired me, was against Rikishi. Because I think it was their way of, the stink face was sort of your, welcome to the business. And he kept it for a long time. I nearly blacked out. But you just remember those moments of being in the ring with the guys you were watching on TV, who are your heroes, and turn out they're the nicest guys, and, they take care of you in the ring. And, but you get that moment of just I'm part of something very special. So I do certainly miss it. But happy to have what I have now.
You didn't get a concussion from Rikishi's ass, did you?
No. I got brain damage from anoxia because I wouldn't breathe, and I couldn't breathe. Right. He stuck it in there.
I work Tommy Dreamer. I'm working him in a few weeks, and I'll be with him in a few weeks for TNA. I'll tell him you said hey.
Oh, well, yeah, Tommy Dreamer is the best. He actually, if you could find my 2006 book, the last chapter is his crazy concussion stories. So he's another one that back then you thought wow, he is totally a million different concussions, a million times knocked out, and he's still thriving, which is great, right? So it just shows concussion is not really, you can come back from concussions, but so I'm glad that he's doing so well.
Right. I love it, man. Chris, thank you very much. It's always great to catch up, and we'll talk soon. I appreciate you.
All right. Thank you both. Great to see you.
Thanks.